can I say how pleased I am to be with you once again at the Institute of Directors Convention, to be here in this afternoon programme where my role is to be the warm-up speaker for Kevin Spacey and Bob Geldof. I want to congratulate the Institute of Directors on your work for Britain, not just in Britain, but your work around the world. And let me just immediately acknowledge the current challenges that everyone faces. Let me praise you for your capacity to respond and adapt in these difficult times, when we not only face a global credit crunch, but we are seeing a speed and a scale and a scope of global change that is frankly unprecedented. And let me also thank the leadership and especially the contribution of your director, Miles Temperman. I fully agree with what Miles said this morning about the importance of celebrating winners and of encouraging and applauding business excellence. And it's sometimes we do not always do in Britain. I'm reminded of Earl Warren, the US Supreme Court judge, who once said he read the sports pages of newspapers first because they focused on human accomplishments, and he read the front pages of newspapers last because they always focused on human failings. I hope we can celebrate all that there is to be proud of Britain. Our entrepreneurial spirit, our creative talent, our ethic of hard work, our global reach and internationalism, so much of which is represented by the successes of the companies here today. Now, what I want to talk about today is how we can build on the British foundations that we have to prepare for the great challenges ahead. We all know that this is a testing time. A credit crunch starting in the American housing market, potentially 2 million repossessions in the States, 9 million on negative equity, rising unemployment, the IMF predicting an American recession, European growth rates predicted to fall. Indeed, people will probably look back to say that this is the first truly global financial crisis of this new era of globalization. But we know we face additional challenges too. Stagnation spreads from the west, but inflation is coming at us from the east. The race for commodities, oil, gas and coal prices up 60%, world food prices up 45%, global food reserves at the lowest level for 30 years. And I can tell you that addressing these global challenges is my first priority. We will do everything we can to help weather this storm. We are putting in place specific measures to help the financial markets and people and businesses most affected. The Bank of England liquidity package, help for homeowners through the Council of Mortgage Lenders, help for first-time buyers through the expansion of new shared equity schemes, and I urge you to look at how private capital could play a role in this market. And we are also taking action to support small businesses, expanding the Small Businesses Loan Guarantee Scheme so that new capital is made available, and asking the European Investment Bank to improve access to finance for medium-sized firms. And French President Sarkozy and I are today asking the Presidency of the European Union and the President of the European Commission to propose a new action plan across Europe to help small companies cope with the impact of the credit crunch. Now, in this world of global financial difficulties, it is essential that immediate action at home is accompanied by cooperation overseas. That's why we are pressing the G7 to implement clearer standards for valuation, changes in the role and use of credit ratings, and of course coordinated disclosure and improved monitoring of crises across borders. And I'm convinced that in a world where we have global flows of capital and yet only national supervisors of financial services, the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, and of course the Financial Stability Forum should now come together to create a better early warning service for the world financial community and create a better crisis prevention facility, which is still lacking in the international economic order. Now, no country can insulate itself from what is happening. As the Institute of Directors recently recognized in your report, we are better placed because inflationary trends are better here than they were in the early 1990s and better than some other countries. And your successes as businesses in the corporate sector, you're running a surplus of about 2% of GDP. It's because of low inflation we've been able to cut interest rates, unlike the euro area. It's because of low debt that we've been able to maintain growth through the use of automatic stabilizers. And I'm pleased to see manufacturers in Britain now taking advantage of the exchange rate to grow and diversify, and I'm pleased that employment is still at record levels and vacancies high, while unemployment is rising in other countries. But my main point to you today is that the pressures we face, and yes, the opportunities available to us, even in these difficult circumstances, are not just short-term, but they're long-term. This is a testing time for all those who believe in an open, flexible, free-trading global economy. Because we're also seeing right in front of our eyes, not just these short-term problems, but longer-term changes. We're witnessing probably the biggest restructuring of the global economy we have seen since the Industrial Revolution. Asia is now producing 80% of our computers, China 60% of our textiles and electronics, India half our call center jobs, Malaysia even taking half the market in plastics, and some of our biggest corporations, IBM, Chorus, Jaguar, Land Rover, are now partially Arab and Asian owned, with Indian and Chinese sovereign wealth funds buying into global companies. And increasingly, as I saw when I was in China and India a few weeks ago, China and India will not compete simply on low pay, as if it were a race to the bottom. 5 million graduates a year turned out by Chinese and Indian universities. Far more engineers being produced there than in Europe and America. Far more computer scientists. They are going to compete on high skills too, and it is now a race to the top throughout the world. But with about 1 million manufacturing jobs transferred from Asia to Asia from Europe and America in the last year, 250,000 service jobs moving offshore, it is understandable, and this is what we've got to deal with, that in Europe and America, worries exist. And it is worrying that the dominant response is not to welcome this new competition, but that people are in fear of their jobs and livelihoods. And we see in America particularly, protectionist sentiment growing, the danger of increasing demands for heavy-handed regulation, pressures for regulating hedge funds and sovereign wealth funds in almost every capital. And there is a reaction building up, popular fears especially across Europe and America, people's fears that even although inflation is low, they're getting consumer products a lot more cheaply out of Asia, even although interest rates are lower as a result of that, people's fears that they are the losers of globalization and not the winners, and their fear that they will be victims in the future and not beneficiaries. I was at a meeting in Washington a few months ago, and I saw this banner of demonstrators who were complaining about free trade agreements, and the banner was entitled "Worldwide Campaign Against Globalization." And this raises the question as to whether, in response to this more testing global economic outlook, the world will relapse into the counterproductive but familiar defensive and negative protectionism. Under the illusion that people can stop change, they will deny themselves what are the competitive benefits that can come from globalization. Now, I want us to stand up together for an open, flexible, free-trading globalization. And I want us to be aggressive advocates of that policy in all our countries. And we should start, I think, business and governments together by showing that the rise of Asia and the wider changes that are now so great being brought about by globalization, they need not be a zero-sum game. That somehow if Asia benefits, Europe must lose. Or if India does well, America must fall by the wayside. I say there are huge opportunities for us all. In just over 20 years' time, we'll have seen the world economy double in size again. We will see over 1 billion new professional or skilled jobs. The global middle class will grow at twice the rate of the rest of the population. New types of knowledge and creative industries are being formed every day. China and India will become countries that don't just sell to us, but want to buy from us some of the best consumer products. And they will become the 3rd and 5th largest consumer markets in the world. This potentially makes it a time of huge opportunity for us all. And Britain is potentially one of the great success stories of this new era. We are the most open, free trading country in the world, and I'm determined we stay so. And we have the greatest global reach of any country to all parts of the world. We will succeed because, secondly, we will take all the long-term decisions that are necessary to remain the hub for international business. Sophisticated financial businesses and legal services coming out of London, and hopefully backed up by the technology and the skills that attract new investment. And the industries that are growing fastest and doing best in Britain are actually the key to the world's next stage of growth. Financial business services, creative industries, IT, pharmaceuticals, advanced manufacturing, environmental technologies, education, the services and industries we can specialize in and will form an increasing share of this global market. So what must we do? First, everybody knows that to succeed, we will have to do everything to remain internationally competitive as a location for business. That means monetary and fiscal stability, because people will not invest in countries that don't command fiscal and monetary stability. But it also means making the great long-term changes necessary in science, transport, planning, energy and infrastructure. And I'm determined that we make all these long-term changes and make them now. We must have energy security, which will require low-carbon energy, and that's why we're leading by investing in nuclear energy now, as well as the next generation of sustainable supplies. And we will make changes not just in energy and climate change. On planning, our new Planning Commission will be up and running soon to make Britain's planning system far more responsive, and it should be far more responsive. On transport, and I know that so many of you complain about Heathrow and about Terminal 5, with Crossrail, Heathrow and round the country, necessary investments will have to be made in transport and infrastructure. Science, we will push forward with our plan to double science and technology investment in this country. Universities, we are investing heavily in their research and teaching capability and deregulating them so that they can make these investments and attract new investment themselves. In every area, I want us to take the long-term decisions that matter to make us internationally competitive. An internationally competitive and global Britain will maintain its flexibility through deregulation and competitive taxation. And cracking the problem of regulation, every advanced industrial economy faces, as I found in America a few weeks ago, will help us all. And it's delivery and it's culture that matters here. That's why we are moving to a new risk-based approach to regulation, to reduce inspection, form filling and information requirements. And my whole emphasis will be on action on the ground. On tax, I recognise we have to be and remain competitive. So we've cut the headline rate of corporation tax to 28 pence this month, a lower rate for small firms, an additional allowance for investment. And our aim, I tell you, is to reduce corporation tax even further when we can afford to do so. And Alistair Darling's announcement yesterday of a new working group on business taxation, I can assure you we will continue to work with you to modernise and, importantly, to simplify the US tax regime, a dialogue for the changes we need. And to succeed in this new global economy, we must focus on flexibility and openness. And I'm convinced we can only persuade an anxious workforce of the benefits of globalisation if we're prepared to equip them with the skills that are needed to do the jobs of the future, to give them the best transitional help to move between jobs, giving them the skills to enable them to do them. So this is not about stopping the clock or attempting to freeze frame, but about giving people the chance to move forward even when the future is uncertain. And it's about helping you get the skilled workers you need to make your companies a success. Education to 18, not 16. Intervention immediately in failing schools. The growth of academies as schools. Massive expansion in lifelong learning with adults given new rights to get skills. Investments in our colleges and universities. The total reform of further education as community colleges. The government will invest £1 billion over the next 3 years in the National Service Train to Gain to provide advice and skills brokering to employers, and new freedoms that you can have, that your qualifications will be nationally accredited. And there'll be a radical expansion in apprenticeships, 90,000 more by 2013. And I want to increase the business involvement at the centre of local employment partnerships, all the time making the long-term decisions necessary for success. And of course, an internationally competitive Britain demands finally a continued commitment to free trade and keeping our economies open. I hope we can work together, not just for a world trade deal, but a better single market in Europe, which is genuinely open for telecommunications, financial services, utilities and energy companies, a better American-Europe transatlantic partnership, and worldwide benefits from breaking down trade barriers and removing subsidies, such as agricultural subsidies, that can be a stimulus to the world economy as a whole. If we don't get a trade deal within a few weeks, there'll not be a trade deal for some years. So I'm raising these issues with all our leaders around the world, and I would urge all of you to join that campaign to show the importance of a trade deal in resisting protectionism. So let me conclude before the questions. Like you, I recognise the scale of challenges ahead. Churchill once said that those who build the present in the image of the past will miss out entirely on the challenges of the future. He complained about leaders in the 1930s who were resolved to be irresolute and adamant for drift and solid for fluidity and all-powerful for impotence. I want us to be powerful for change, and I will not be diverted from the mission for our country to move forward in an open, free trade and flexible globalization, to build a more competitive, prosperous Britain, a country ready to be a winner in the global era. And it can only be done by us working together. Britain works best when Britain works together, and that is the challenge for all of us. Thank you very much.